So today is the first time I've actually had a chance to talk about my time in India. As you know, it's not everyone knows, but I was gone for almost 4 months studying in Dharamsala, which was a very rich experience, and there are lots of stories. But the story I want to tell is, for me, it was kind of the crystallizing moment, in a way, of an overview of where I, as a Buddhist practitioner, and I as a nun, and then where Sravasti Abbey sort of fits into a grand scheme, a plan of His Holiness the Dalai Lama that was described by the Sikyong, the president of the Tibetan government in exile, Dr. Losang Sangye. He gave this speech when I went to the Dolmaling Nunnery to represent Venerable Children in the Abbey to celebrate the 30-year anniversary of the Tibetan Nuns Project. It was a big event. There were lots and lots of nuns, and dignitaries and so forth, really celebrating the huge accomplishment that Tibetan Nuns Project has contributed towards, the education of nuns, not just education, just establishing good housing and good sanitation and good nutrition, and building a place where nuns could go. In the beginning, it was nuns that were leaving Tibet, and they had very difficult, kind of harrowing stories to get there. These days, it's more women coming from the Himalayan regions of northern India and right outside of there. But still, elevating, if I can use that word, nuns to a place in the whole kind of Tibetan and Buddhist structure that they have never really had before. So that celebration, really looking at all of the contributions that people have made with His Holiness, at the very front, but many, many other people, both Tibetan and Western, involved in creating a situation where they were celebrating the first 20 nuns to receive the Geshe-ma degree for the first time in history, and how that came about. So it was a very wonderful celebration. The second batch of nuns actually just received their degree this year. I think there's 4 or 6, not quite as many. The first batch was big because they were kind of waiting for a long time to be able to get to take their exams. So they will be smaller. But now in the major nunneries, everybody is in that Geshe education program. They may or may not choose to take their exams as they get further along, but that philosophical training program is well established in Dolmaling, in Jangchum Choling, Gendon Choling, and so forth. So they're Jangchum Choling too in the south. So it's well established. But it was this particular story that the Sikyong told that, I don't know, I was so inspired. He said, he was talking about the accomplishments of the Tibetan Nuns Project and his gratitude for His Holiness' vision, his inspiration, and the successful revival of the Tibetan culture, and the Dharma in particular. And he said, His Holiness, from the time that he came out of Tibet in 1959, who knows where this idea was conceived, but he said he had a 4-point plan in order to protect and preserve the Dharma and Tibetan culture. Plan A, revive Buddhism among the exiled Tibetans. And so as soon as they arrived in India, and I realized this morning that India was a brand new country too at that time. They had only had their independence since 1947, I think. So here, no, India, yeah. So India as a new democratic nation welcoming these exiles, which His Holiness never stops thanking them for. I'm quite weepy about this stuff, so if I kind of get teary, forgive me. But so as soon as they arrived, His Holiness, without a moment, said, whatever monks there are, I don't care if there are 10 or there are 100, you continue your studies. Continue right now. And as we know, many of the lamas that we have known who have come here went to Buxar and finished their education and so forth, with His Holiness saying, don't stop for a minute. Brick by brick, stone by stone, as the Sikyong said, they rebuilt the monasteries and rebuilt their educational institutions. And he said that the Tibetan, the bringing up of the Tibetan nuns was a part of that plan, was to bring them into the system as well. Plan B, if that didn't work, revive Buddhism among in the border countries of the Himalayas. So and in addition to, but it was there as Plan B, as a backup. No, okay, it wasn't a backup. Plan B was also to institute reviving and really nourishing Tibetan Buddhism in the Himalayan regions, both inside India and then Bhutan, countries outside of there, and Mongolia as well. So again, from very early on, those teachings went there. As you may remember when Geshe Ladron was here telling the story that His Holiness came and taught in the early 1980s and said, if nuns want to come to Dharamsala, you can come. I mean, they were recruiting in those areas and hoping to develop Buddhism there. And indeed, today, many of the monastics that are coming are from those regions, more because the Tibetans can't get out as much. So it's a lot of those regions are represented in the training programs. Many of the Geshe-mas are from those regions. And they are also reestablishing monasteries and nunneries and bringing their education back to those regions in northern India. Plan C, spread Buddhism in Western countries. It was 1962 when Geshe Lhundup Sopa finished his Larampa Geshe degree, and that same year, His Holiness sent him to the United States. So he was not the only one, but he was one that was close to us, that we're familiar with. And the seeds of just Geshe Sopa alone, and then what happened at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, in terms of training students who then began to translate the Dharma into English and other Western languages, but principally English, we can see as a direct result, actually, of us being able to practice here today. And then Plan D was to revive Buddhism in Tibet itself. Now, we don't know what's happening with that so much right now, but one statistic that His Holiness cited at every talk I attended was that today, according to Pew Research Center, there are 245 million Buddhists practicing in China. And right, I wrote it down, and I looked at my notes when I went back and reviewed my study, and I said, no, that's not right. But the next time he taught it, he said it again. I think he said 240, but 240 to 45 million Buddhists practicing even in China. And so this idea of, out of such, we know the history of what happened in Tibet, such awful suffering that still continues, that people, that His Holiness and others can't go back to their home country yet. But out of that, my point, and the thing that moved me so much was that, His Holiness is very famous saying about never give up. From that moment, he never gave up. He never stopped thinking. He never stopped planning. And the seeds that he planted are all over the world. That we are a part of those seeds. That Venerable Children went, learned, studied, came back, established this monastery with his encouragement and his blessing. And each and every one of us here and everyone involved with the Abbey is practicing to cultivate the teachings that we've learned, our wisdom, our compassion that is growing. And he said also a very sweet thing. He's talking a lot about being tired and being old and conserving his energy. And one of the things he said, as I look at conserving my energy, I look at, sentient beings, we make meditations over and over about the sufferings of the various realms. And then I look at the animals and you see the bugs here. And he said, what can I really do for them? I can make prayers, but there's not much I can do. But he said, there's 7 billion human beings on this planet. Those 7 billion people I can talk to. I can make contact with. There are things that I can do. And so for the rest of my life, I am putting that energy towards working to benefit these 7 billion human beings. And how are we doing that? Doing that by, promoting these basic human values. doing it by promoting compassion and kindness as, fundamental things that every single human being can relate to, and that we must revive as a species because, there's a lot in danger and we've made a lot of mistakes. He's doing it by talking to young people, encouraging students, everybody to get involved with cultivating these kinds of minds and looking for ways to benefit each other and the planet. And he's also doing it by going all over India and really inspiring the Indians to revive their own connection to these kinds of teachings. And he says, India, if you start with educating students in this way, India, with 1 billion people, can be a powerful force in the world. And that's really true. So this plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, being executed, not because, His Holiness has his finger on every little bit of it, but he understands fantastically what dependent arising is all about. And he's compelled by a compassion that he wants to grow in every one of us. And so I don't know, it's Christmas Eve, right? The inspiration of wishing to benefit all living beings, to bring people out of our suffering. To me, that's what Christmas has always been about in the Western world, people wanting to be saved from their suffering. We all want to be free of our suffering, and we want to have happiness. And how fortunate we are that we've met the Buddha's teachings. How fortunate, how extraordinary, really, that those of us on this continent, in this part of the world, would ever have met such teachings and then have the opportunity to study them in our own language, to practice them, to develop these qualities in our own hearts, and then to share them with the people, whichever country we come from. We're a diverse bunch here. But to share them with the 7 billion people in the world. I don't know, I felt very much a part of His Holiness's army, if you will. Pardon that military term, but it felt like that, to be just a little tiny piece in the great, beautiful vision who never gives up, no matter how much suffering there is, how much ugliness there is, how much bad talk there is in the world, how close we may be to destruction itself, never giving up, but always relying with tremendous confidence on the basic kindness of living beings, and then on the teachings of the Buddha, the absolute wisdom that we have as the undergirding, whether people are Buddhist or not, but it's the underpinning of that whole view. So that's really what I wanted to share today. It's not so much a story about my trip to India, but it's the overarching message that I came home with, that I feel more internalized. It's not that it wasn't there, but somehow through that it is stronger, and so it's clear what the rest of my life is about. And I'm thrilled to be home. I'm thrilled that we have Sravasti Abbey, and I have lots of stories to tell you about how grateful I am about that. But we'll do that another time. But it is, it's a privilege and a responsibility to have the opportunity we have, to have created the karma that we have, to take advantage of that situation, and also to be able to do it together in this community. And so, if I would make 3 prostrations to Venerable Children for bringing this about, and I know she's just part of the plan too, in some ways. But thank you so much, and thank everyone here who keeps it going. So thank you all.